Hello, hello. Hi, Para community. Good afternoon, evening, or morning from wherever you are connecting with us on this live stream that is hosted by Product People. Happy 1st of July. Super nice to have all of you here with us today. We are streaming live from Facebook, Twitch, YouTube, and LinkedIn. So make sure that you grab your friends, grab some popcorn, and join us on any of these platforms to hear more about the topic that we'll be discussing today. So we don't want this to be like a one road thing. We would like you also to meet us halfway, which is why we have the Slido here. We'll have an icebreaker session towards the beginning. And we'll also have questions and answers towards the end. So you can reach us on Slido for that. So please feel free to scan your QR here, or if you're feeling adventurous, you can also go directly to slider.com and type in 3584838 as the code. And you'll be able to join us from there to ask your questions or also for the icebreaker poll that we have in a while. So super, super nice to see you back here with Product People. So the topic that we have today is product management for when your life depends on it, where a speaker will be Gaurav, and he is having like a super, super nice presentation already for all of you. So a little bit about your host today. My name is Angie. I've been about the product space for about 5 years, and I joined last year to Product People as an associate. And in terms of who Product People is, we provide interim product management services, products ops, and transformation acceleration services to our in-house staff. We also provide and host free events just like this one, and for Europe's largest PM community, which boasts about 60,000 members altogether. So this is our icebreaker poll, and we really want to get to know you so that also Gaurav will have like a feel of who our audience is today. So please go to slider.com. You can type in the code 3584838, or you can scan in the QR that you have on the screen right now. So the question for you today is, if you were designing an emergency response product, what would you prioritize most? A. Speed and latency of communication. B. User interface clarity under stress. C. Offline low connectivity functionality. Or D. Location accuracy and data privacy. So you could respond to us on Slido. Feel free to go wild with this and tell us what your best response is. I already see a couple of answers coming in. Super nice. Um, I wonder what I'll choose here actually. What would I prioritize? Hmm. Possibly speed and latency of communication. Because I would want the product to basically make sure that whatever I am, whatever I'm trying to connect with will go through quickly. But let's see what our audience is saying. Here we'll give a bit of time for everybody to respond. Super cool. So many responses coming through. Super exciting. Alrighty. So there's 100%, and that definitely wasn't the answer that I gave. That's user interface clarity under stress. Perfect. So over to you, Gaurav. Product management for when your life depends on it. The platform is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Sanji. I think the audience has done a fantastic job. They already know the content of my presentation, actually, given the response. My name's Gaurav. I'm the product lead at Motorola Solutions, and the topic really is when your life depends on it for in terms of product management. This picture that I'm showing here is of an actual control room in Texas, I believe, and this is an emergency control room. So when you actually dial in 110 112, it would probably reach a control room that looks like this. So now just a very brief introduction about me. I am a product lead at Motorola Solutions. I've handled quite a few different products with them. I've been for a fairly long time with them, and I've handled product management, pre-sales, as well as engineering for quite a long time. And I'm also a DI champion at my current organization. The pictures on the right side just tell you a bit more about my hobby, and these are all the places I've visited already this year. So that's my hobby on a personal note, and that's my LinkedIn profile underneath if you wish to connect with me, and I'll be happy to take this conversation further as well on LinkedIn and offline. Good. A quick word about my employer. We're Motorola Solutions. We're a very large corporation, nearly 100 years now in existence, and you can see some of these stats. But I like to call our organization, I refer to us as really being the Google suite or the ERP of public safety, because we take care of all aspects of an emergency incident, right from a call coming in all the way to incarceration. So we take care of all the piece of the incident timeline. We focus on three primary areas. One is of unified communications, the command center, which is what I showed you the picture earlier, and video security. Now I'd like all of you to just take a step back and just think about, when was the last time you had an emergency, a serious emergency, whether that be a medical emergency, some issue on the road, some kind of assault, any kind of emergency. When was the last time you encountered such an emergency? And at that point of time, what was your typical response? You would have called up 110 or 112, right? Now think about it. You've called them up, the first ring, the second ring, the third ring, and let's say nobody answers. Okay. Nobody answers your call, your emergency call. Okay. That provides you the context of what we do. Okay. Because we all assume that being safe is a basic right in our community. So having a public safety product is really that promise that we are going to keep you safe. So that's really the context. And through these slides, I will take you to what are really the critical factors that we look at when we actually set up or we design a public safety product. What are the aspects that we consider? So this is more or less a framework as to what we do and why we do. So the next question is, are you reachable? And think about it. When you call up 112 or 110, you expect that that call will be answered, right? That's your basic premise. But let's say if you're not able to reach that, what happens? What are the alternative mechanisms you have in the public safety product per se that allow you to reach out to that emergency control room? Can you do SMS to 112? Can you do a WhatsApp to them? Can you have a video call with them, or even fax for that matter? Can you fax to 112? And believe it or not, yes, fax to 112 is something, it does exist. So all of these are the options. Are you reachable as a citizen? Think about it. When you drive a car on the road and there's been an accident, if you've seen in many vehicles, you have the SOS button. What that SOS button really does is it helps set up that call from your car to the public safety access point, to basically your emergency control room. The EU, the European Union, when they did a study, they said about 2,500 lives get saved a year just because people have been able to use that SOS button. So are you reachable? And very recently, if you are aware of this, the European Accessibility Act came into being for for all sorts of digital communication equipment, whether that be to phones, to smartphones, to ATMs, e-commerce sites, websites. And I believe it's been a week now, so I think June 25th is when they actually it's gone into force, and that forces all of these mechanisms, all of these mediums that you actually use to reach, uh, the actual provider. It forces them to actually follow the accessibility standards. So, as a citizen, am I able to reach my emergency control room when it's needed? If I have a constraint due to a disability, can I yet reach them? If I'm stuck in a car during an accident, can I yet reach them? If I cannot speak on the phone, can I yet use my hands and somehow maybe type in a SMS? All of these are considerations that we put into play when we actually design a public safety product. So that's where the next point comes. These are essentially the regulatory aspects that we look at when we design a public safety application. The third one, and I think this is something that everybody understands very, very clearly. Just you have GDPR, you have FedRAMP procedures. These are these are essentially certification. These are essentially compliance that we have to adopt in order to be able to say, okay, you are able to use this public safety product. And some very simple examples that might not be really apparent. Let's say if there is a camera at a railway station and it's actually capturing your photographs, right? Or if you're driving a car and it's a camera is taking pictures of the license plate, how does that match with the privacy laws for that country and the EU as a whole? So that those are the considerations that need to be taken care of if when a police officer goes to court and submits pictorial evidence. Is the Are the bystanders, are their faces redacted? All of that is part of the considerations that we need to do when we look at not only the data but also the regulatory standards. And so this is the security aspect of it. Whether your data is secure, is your location available, is your are your personal details available for access? All of these come into the security layer for public safety. Now we'll do an experiment here. All of you all would probably have smartphones, right? And maybe you have some handy around you. So we can do this experiment for about 30 seconds. Pick up your smartphone, but close your eyes. Okay, close your eyes and go to your smartphone and go to the most often used application on that smartphone without opening your eyes. Take about 15-20 seconds to do that. Chances are it takes a lot more than that. You'll probably go to your power button, you'll hit 3 4 other buttons, you'll try to use your fingerprint or some other mechanism. All of these are considerations that need to now start becoming human centric. So if you look at the picture on the left, the next time you go in and encounter a police officer on the road, go and take a look at how they're dressed. Why is it that they're wearing a particular type of vest? Why is a particular piece of equipment or device located in a particular position on their body? Why is it that they might have something on their shoulder versus in the middle of their body, right? All of these are human centric decisions. Why? Because they are meant for split second decision making. Okay, if you see this, the device on the right, it's a Motorola device. You'll see there's a orange button there. When you go and actually use that, when you see that orange button, and you'll see it, and when you look at any police officer on the road, chances are that they have a Motorola device. Look at the device and see if there's an orange button on top. That orange button is specifically created with a particular color, with a particular angle, and it's also actually very depressed. It's a bit depressed. It's not, at the surface level. The design of that button is really created in order to be able to use that equipment without even looking at it, without even seeing it, without even in that split second when you have just half a second to be able to actually radio somebody for help or be able to set up an emergency. So by the way, that button is actually called an emergency button, and that emergency button typically gets used in when the a police officer senses that situation is beyond their level of control. So it is an emergency situation even for the officers. So you'll see that that's there. But remember, in that emergency situation, when you are operating that device under stress, you do not have the liberty to be able to go and hit a power button, put in a fingerprint, or put in some numeric key code, and then go into the application. You have of the order of half a second to a second to actually make that split decision. So that's why when your designs are created for public safety, it has to be meant, it has to be created for split second decision making. So why is a gun on the right side versus the left side? You would have seen some Western movies where, you would see in the hero, they kind of cross their arms and remove the guns. You will actually not see that in real life. You may actually see it on a different side. Why? Because those are meant for split second decision making. So So IR designs human centric, and this is very very key. So hardware design is an extremely important aspect of how we design public safety products. How extensive are the interconnects? And now this will be fascinating for those of you who are not aware about how extensively this industry works. When you call up an emergency line, in that first 6 to 10 seconds or maybe 15 seconds, all of the data about your phone number, your location, whether you've previously called up 112, and are you a crank caller, for example? Have you been previously incarcerated? Have you been jailed earlier? Do you have a gun at your disposal? What's been your previous health conditions? What kind of a car do you have, and has it been reported for use can we find out whether the car has been used for some criminal activities? All of these aspects, what kind of a location are you staying in? Is there a possibility of getting a fire engine because your lane may be really narrow? Or is there a hose pipe, or a fire hose that's available near your house? What are the building plans for where you're staying? What is the easiest route to reach your place? All of these decisions are done within the first 10 to 15 seconds of that call being set up. Okay. And imagine how complex that starts to get. Okay. So all of this information is already made available when the time you've already made that call with a particular number, and either you've identified yourself or maybe you're not even identified yourself. All of these pieces of information are brought into the emergency control room. And again, this is just a broad set of examples. It differs from country to country based on laws, based on privacy concerns, and all of that. Okay, but this is just to kind of show you how extensively that interconnect will be. So that's where the every public safety product is deeply interconnected with systems that are owned by state bodies, federal bodies, and local bodies. Okay, and also with other private players as well. How do you augment human decision making? Now, I'll tell you about two cases that I heard of very very recently. Uh, let's say you know, let's say you are a foreigner and you are visiting a country, let's say, where you don't speak the native language. Let's say I speak only English and I visit Spain, and there's been an incident out there with me, and I call up the local emergency control room, and they speak Spanish. Okay, how do I get my message across? How do I get the help? Chances are, by the time they're able to arrange a translator to come and talk to me, it takes the order of a few minutes, by which time there could have been a calamity that's already, there could be a crisis that's already affected me, you know. So how do I augment that human decision? Can I do real time translation of the voice, of my voice, from English to Spanish? Can my software detect, okay, this person is speaking in English, whereas my call taker only speaks Spanish? Can I do real time translation and get that information? So that's one real use case that we've seen being used in public safety. The second one, let's say a child is lost in a city. You're again visiting, some place, and your child is lost, and you call up the emergency control. You give them the details of how you what shirt is your child wearing, what color pants are they wearing, how do they look, whatever, some details, right? At that point of time, how is it that and I know that there are camera systems across the city, but how do I really narrow down where is this child seen? Because that child could have the by the time you actually have somebody looking through a lot of cameras, maybe even if they've isolated the area, maybe the parent says, I know it was in this area, but typically if you go to typically touristy areas, you have hundreds of cameras out there. Which one do I turn on? It is an extremely manual intensive task. So how do you use elements like AI in that case, where what you do is you use AI to be able to actually find that child faster, right? And it's my CTO, he uses a very common phrase where he says that we use AI not to find the needle in the haystack, but really to clear the haystack. Okay, and to find that needle essentially. So that's the way we use AI. So AI is used in public safety, but it's used for augmenting decision making and not for making the decision. It's always used to augment it, and that's where AI comes into play. Now, most of us, as in our professions, most, I guess all of us, mostly we are all in the tech profession. We typically at when we work from home or in the office, we're used to working with our laptops or with maybe a monitor, and we have typically have one to two monitors on the side. What you see out here is a real case where a public safety operator, an emergency operator, typically they have 4 to 6 screens that they have and they're monitoring at the same time. Okay, so there's a common meme that we use where we say it's like swivel chair gymnastics. So you're sitting in the chair, you're swiveling in it, and you're doing gymnastics across those 6 screens. So how do you make the user experience for that persona very easy? How do you enable these 6 different applications to easily share data amongst each other, to be able to have a single SSO, for example, a single sign-on also across different applications? These are aspects that you have to consider when you design a public safety application, because you do not have that liberty of 30 seconds or 1 minute to copy information from one application into another application. In public safety, we say that seconds save lives, and by second meaning that in terms of time, the seconds save lives. And it is extremely true in public safety, because you do not want the operator to be able to be constrained with having to work with applications that don't talk to each other. Rather, they all have to be interconnected. So this is so your CX, end-to-end CX, is really really important out here. The next part is, can everybody use it? And I spoke briefly about accessibility, but you have different personas. Can I have a person who's permanently disabled be able to use my applications versus those who are temporarily disabled, like this person with a cast, or a person who's contextually disabled, like this person who has a baby in their hand? Can anybody use it? Can your application function for a visually impaired person, for a speech impaired person, or for a hearing impaired person, right? So your application has to solve each of these cases. When you're involved in public safety, you cannot design for that typical persona that's out there. Your persona has to include all of these other aspects as well. So applications need to be created with accessibility in mind, and that's the last aspect. Now, the next one, is it pretty? And this is typically, I remember somebody telling me, make it valuable, then make it easy, then make it fast, and then make it pretty. So, sure, a user interface, having a nice, clean user interface is very, very important as well. So, being able to effortlessly use your application, having it simple, easy to use, good iconography, easy to use buttons, because your why this becomes important is because your persona may not just be a 30-year-old youngster or maybe a teen who's using your application. Your persona could be actually a 60-year-old train driver who would have to use maybe their grubby hands and actually make a call to you, or who would actually have to answer your call. So your UI has to be catered to, and it has to be flexible enough to be adapted to any kind of persona. Okay. I remember an incident that happened with me where, when I was part of the sales team, I went to one of the Nordic countries and I met with the railways in that country. And at that point of time, I was a newbie to sales, and I spoke about how fantastic our smartphone application is and how there's so many options, features. And then they gave me a reality check and they told me, do you know who a persona is? A persona is actually a 60-year-old train driver who doesn't know how to use a smartphone. How are you going to get them to use this application? And that changed my perspective as well. So your user interface and the persona that you're designing for is also very, very critical. So yes, so that's a framework that I wanted to take you through as to how you go about thinking about a public safety product as well. And I'll leave you with this statistic that we often quote in our company, where we say that when you save 60 seconds, it can save up to 10,000 lives a year. And while one might debate on the numeric accuracy, I think at the end of the day, we cannot deny that when you save seconds in an emergency incident, it has a real world impact. It can save lives. So at heart is that basic truth, that a public safety product is really meant to save lives. So as product managers, as a product lead, it is our job really, when you come in and work in as a public safety product specialist, or I do, we have to approach this line with a lot more clarity, a lot more empathy, and a lot more understanding that at the end of the day, we've made a promise to the community that we are going to keep their lives safe. So thank you all for the opportunity to speak today. I hope you got an insight into how we go about designing public safety products. And I'll open up it up for questions. And Angie, over to you if you'd like to take this.
Thank you, Gaurav. This was like a really nice talk, and I really loved how you brought in practicalities and ingrained it into your conversation. So it was really lovely listening to you. So thank you so very much. And the segment that all of you have been waiting for is here, the Q&A. Please, again, feel free to meet us on Slido. You can do so by scanning the QR that you see here, or you can directly go to slido.com and type in the code 3584838. So while our audience does go up on Slido, I'm going to buy you some time and go into a bit about, again, use cases where you can engage us as product people. So there are three different verticals that we look at: interim, fractional product managers, program management and product operations, and transformation acceleration services. You can also, if you would like, you can also go to our website at getproductpeople.com and go through what we have in store for you. So these are a few of our B2C clients, a very high level snapshot. B2B clients, we also work with World Health Organization, Cognigy or Metria, a few of our clients that we look at. So in terms of the stats, we have 300 cross-functional teams supported, where we have 42 product leaders and product managers who are all in-house and full-time. And we are proud to say that we also have 62% of the team who are all women, and 66% who are in leadership. So thank you so very much for listening, and thank you for everybody who has tuned right in. If there's anybody that you would want to join us, we are live on Facebook, Twitch, YouTube, and LinkedIn. So feel free to come hop on and maybe ask any questions that you would have. So I do see that we have a couple of questions coming in. But before we get to the audience questions, there is one question that I would like to sneak in, Gaurav, if you don't mind. And that is, what does it take for a product or feature to be considered done in your line of work? And how does this differ from traditional product management?
Okay, I'm glad you asked that. So, uh, I think the underlying principles are in terms of what a product person does within my organization or any other are really universal. I think when we went through that framework, pretty much I think everybody would have identified that yes, we do parts of these, we do in some way or the other. So I think the underlying philosophy, the underlying principles, and the underlying product management principles are common. Where I see there is a large difference, in my opinion, is that the amount of discovery that we do for every product, whether it's a feature that you release or product, is extremely different. So uh, I'll give you an example. I am involved in discovery sessions nearly every day with my stakeholders, with my customers. So I have at least a discovery session going on every day, because think about it, at the end of the day, it's not about you buying something on an e-commerce site. You're affecting the life of somebody out there, right? So your discovery needs to really be attuned to that. So that's one. So we do a lot more intense discovery sessions with our partners. We do a lot of research, in the sense we actually have drive alongs where we actually go along with, let's say, a police officer, sit in the back of a car and see how they actually respond to situations. We go to a control room and see, okay, and we hear in on calls, okay, how is it that the call taker, how did they actually address it, what kind of context switching was happening. So the discovery sessions are very, very intense in this field, and I think are of a longer duration, because you really don't think about it. A bug that you might see in a typical product, in our case, it's really not a bug, it's a potential crisis, right? So you have to, that's why that's one area that I do see a lot of difference in behavioral usage, but in terms of behavior, not but otherwise, in terms of product management principle, I think they're largely the same. It also does require a fair bit of insight into the domain, right? So I've been part of the engineering team, then I've done sales, and then I've come into products. So I've had that rounded expertise into how we actually design these products and what do we actually do. So it does require a little bit of domain expertise, but that's not something that cannot be acquired. And so that's I think it's these are really the two places that I see a little bit of a difference.
Thank you so much, Gaurav, for that explanation. I can only imagine what it's like to do product discovery while sitting in the back of a police car. That must have been like super intense for you. Whoa. Cool. So we do have another question. What does your team's processes for identifying and mitigating potential edge cases or events look like?
I'm I'm glad you brought this up because customers typically buy for the sunny day scenario and they expect it to work in the rainy day scenario. you know um, it is a reality, and I'll give you some examples of how you can see that. uh, Typically, and you would have seen, when, let's say, you go to a concert or some place where there's a large event taking place, uh, and you try to do video streaming, you try to do make a call to somebody, sometimes you just don't get through, right? To maybe able to video stream, or you don't get a call through sometime. Or let's say there's been let's say there's been some kind of a weather condition. Let's say it's raining, it's stormy, it's those impact your call coverage. All of these are cases that have to be addressed, and this is something that we cannot. When you do backlog management, you do roadmap prioritization, you cannot keep those for later. Those are items that you need to take and address upfront. So, as an example, when if you have a product and it's a cloud-based product, typically when you talk about cloud-based product, you also talk about resiliency, right? Right. So it does it have, what kind of availability do you have? Do you have 3 nines availability, 4 nines availability, 5 nines availability? Now think about what that really means. A typical consumer application could suffice with 3 nines availability, and what that means is that for in a year, that application could be down for about 9 hours or so. Okay, so you, over a period of a year, you would have 9 hours of outage on that. A public safety application typically handles 5 nines productive availability. And what that means is 5 nines means that you have a downtime of about only 5 minutes a year. Okay, and that is how the design changes, and that's why sometimes public safety projects also are long, take a long time to implement, because you are designing for that edge case. You're not designing for the sunny day case, you're designing for that edge case always. You're designing for when you have availability only for 5 minutes in a year. You're designing for that condition where there's an earthquake and the cell phone towers are down, but you yet need to communicate. You need to be able to be reachable, and whether it's not only through voice but also for through video or for to SMS. You have to design for those edge cases always, and that's upfront and center, and that's non-negotiable. So thank you for asking that question, and it's a great question.
Thanks, Gaurav. Thanks for that explanation. Um, okay, so the next question that we have is, in situations with incomplete data, how do you balance quantitative analysis with experience intuition when making a critical product
Okay.
call?
Yes, and this happens sometimes. In fact, when we do research, in some cases we don't necessarily have the quantitative data to actually back up our decisions. Uh, so in that sense, we do go back and do a lot of experimentation, but it's very, very controlled experiments. So I'll give you an example. uh, we were And again, I'm going back to examples because that's easier for me to relate to. We were debuting an application at the Winter Olympics in Switzerland, I think it was, if I recall. At that point of time, because the officers there at the Winter Olympics, they were fairly young. They were conversant with how a smartphone works. We had the opportunity to actually give a few of them our smartphone application and say, hey, why don't you use this? And when there's, for example, an incident, use that smartphone to actually record the or detail your incident. And we would, and a few of us would actually be shadowing them and actually seeing how they use that, in order to be able to exactly find out how is it that they actually end up doing. So we do rely on qualitative analysis and qualitative feedback. Many a times we are fortunate that we have a lot of good reference customers who are willing to actually spend time with us and actually take us to the ropes and say, this is really how you should be designing sometimes your system. So we do have that advantage of being able to go back to a customer. But sometimes even when you don't have the customers, we do end up doing controlled experiments, and then we also have our team, our research team, including us, actually shadowing these customers and seeing how is it that they use it and are there places that we could improve. So uh, great question. It happens, and then you have to fall back on other traditional methods. Yeah.
Makes sense. Thank you so much for that. Um, so the other question that we have is, as technology like AI and machine learning become more integrated into these life critical systems, what do you see as the next major challenge and responsibility for product managers in this space?
Okay. I'll speak specific to public safety first, and then because I know that this is a broad topic and there are many experts in this field. But in public safety, like I said, we use AI a lot to actually augment decision making. And we've been doing this not, recently, since ChatGPT and LLM came into vogue, but way back when we actually had our lines of fixed video cameras. We had a lot of analytics being done out of that. And some of the examples that I spoke about, for example, about the child being lost, were really developed as part of that AI and machine learning, and that learning that came with training the models as to how we should be able to use AI. So a few other examples, like uh, if you look at how an incident gets handled in courts, there's a lot of work in terms of being able to produce evidence in courts, right? So when you actually have to submit evidence, you have to do a lot of redaction. And what redaction means is that you need to be able to mask the faces of children, of bystanders, of location specific information, of the license plate of cars. And earlier, all of this used to be manual effort. So imagine in a single picture, if you had to do that, how many minutes it would take. We've used AI so that now an officer can go through an entire video of a few hours and complete this redaction process in the order of a few minutes, right? So that's how you use AI to really augment that decision and to be able to improve and help that decision making to be much more split second, rather than it taking so many hours. So that's really how we are using AI. So it is used, but it's used in a very controlled mechanism. We do leverage some of the work that's being done by some of the open AIs of the world. In fact, there's a common meme that we use: BC and AC. It means before Chat GPT and after Chat GPT. So that's just something humorous. But yeah, I think that's it's AI is incorporated into each of our businesses, and we use it to augment our decision making.
Cool. Thank you so much, Gaurav. And I think that with that, we have come to the end of our Q&A. Um, So thank you so much for our audience. It was really nice to have you here with us while we spoke on this topic. A few other QRs that you can scan. We are also hiring, and you can also subscribe to a newsletter. So feel free to scan these QRs and meet us where you are at. And next week, we do have yet another live stream, same time. And we have Gil talking about the journey from intern to product leadership. Super interesting stuff. So we will be really looking forward to meeting you there as well. And thank you so much. Thank you, Gaurav, for this amazing, amazing topic and for taking us through your personal experiences as well and really bringing life to this topic. And thank you to our audience. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for having us and see you next week
Thank
as
you,